Hi, we're here today. We're going to be talking Thrive Thursday today, which we do on every Thursday. Today we're talking with Lori, who wrote an incredible article called Core Values or Just the Words on the Wall. I really love that you went here, Lori, because we see this, we've been working a lot in businesses lately, and it's a very timely topic for us. And oftentimes we're talking more on our lifestyle side that is relevant in business, but I feel like we're talking on the core value side that people can see that is actually still relevant in lifestyle in terms of core values within families and everything. So first I want to talk about what is your intention with this article, where did the inspiration come from, and let's just dive in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like that you brought up the lifestyle side because this impacts, if you work somewhere in a culture, this impacts your life.
Yeah.
And so how many times have you been in an environment or worked at a company and they have these great core values, but you don't even know what they mean to you? You see them on the wall and yeah, they look good. And periodically management brings them up, but what do they really mean to me?
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing is like you said, we've been in a lot of businesses lately. And I see these core values, and then you talk to senior leadership or you talk to managers or the CEO, and you ask about their core values, or you ask about what values they adhere to or what motivates them or drives them. And oftentimes they're not the ones on the wall.
Right.
And so I find that fascinating because even when I worked in public accounting and I was in all sorts of businesses, it was the same thing. You see it everywhere. And I'm like, why do you go through all the trouble of establishing those values when you don't use them as the impetus to drive your culture and to drive your people and to drive productivity, when you could really use them for that? So
Yeah.
the key reason behind why you would have core values, you're missing altogether. And so I find it fascinating.
Can you give an example of some core values, Lori, that maybe, people would adopt? Like what are some ideas around what a core value actually is, in case there's anybody out there that hasn't really understood or knows about this concept?
Well, one that I find vague oftentimes is they say, client service or customer service. Well, what does that look like? So although it's a great value, it'll look different in each department, and it'll look different depending on whether your customer's internal or external. And so oftentimes when a core value is developed, it doesn't go beyond that. So what does it mean to the individual in their job or the person on the manufacturing line? And I think that's where companies misstep that. And that's where employees who are working in these organizations, they're like, yeah, it's a core value, but I'm over here doing this. And how does that relate to me when I'm not dealing with external customers? Well, it does relate to you. And let's talk about what it looks like for you.
Well, I think that the other thing that's really coming up for me is that oftentimes the people in the organization aren't really a part of defining what the core values are, or, and so how do they even figure out what that core value is? Maybe, like you said, that's kind of handed down from the top, and then all of a sudden I'm supposed to live this, and I'm supposed to know what they mean by this value.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's I love that thought of, how am I supposed to align with this? They put it on the wall and then I forget about it.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm totally forgetting, what that value is, and never do any more additional talking about it, or how do I actually implement this into my day-to-day operation within an organization?
And what's so critical is the component they're missing is that person on the manufacturing line could really be inspired or motivated by that connection.
Yeah.
And it's never made. So you're kind of missing the opportunity on both ends.
Yeah.
Missing the opportunity of it, really fueling and inspiring and building momentum within this individual. And you're also missing the connection that individual has to a customer, or to an internal customer, or, whoever the customer is for that position.
So keep going.
Well, so I look at core values as being these dynamic, breathing things that, if used properly, have so many different aspects to them that we seem to be missing everywhere.
Yeah, I almost feel like it's getting to the point where people are like, oh, we should have core values. So let's figure out what those are. But there is no education around what to actually do with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Mm-hmm.
And so then we plunk them on the wall and look, see what we did. We have these values, and we don't use them as a centering point. And so what I love core values for is a centering point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have personal values that I operate by.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, one of my values is I live life instead of just surviving it. And so that guides behavior and mindset around how I operate in the world and the decisions that I make and the things that I choose to experience in life, because that's one of my values.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, if people can understand that from that perspective, pay attention to what values you're operating by, and then they can change their values. And sometimes what we can do is when we change our internal values or understand our internal values, we can then align to our corporate values that are on the wall, even if the organization doesn't do it for us.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that you brought it down to the individual core values.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said, these are the values I operate by. Yeah. And that's critical to know that about yourself too. What are my values? What drives me?
Yeah.
Because then you can start taking a different approach to life. What's motivating me? You know, what do I align with? And I mean, that could be the impetus for the individual to live a fuller life.
Absolutely. And then, you know, we can do that within our organizations. We do that individually. We can take it and have core values for our family.
Absolutely.
People don't call them core values, or they don't think about it that way. But when we think about it that way, it kind of sets the standard for how you operate and how you interact with each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So I don't see a difference I see them so valuable, I guess, for all different facets of in areas of our lives.
I would agree with that.
Awesome. Awesome. Is there anything that you would like to, so in the article you talk about some ways to implement the core values, or, you know, some ideas around key strategies to help guide you in it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. And what really, you kind of touched on it earlier. Sometimes core values are established and then they're pushed down. Mm-hmm. And so the component of that I feel we're missing is they're key influencers, they're key culture drivers, they're people within your organization that you light that fire and they take off. Mm-hmm. And those are the ones that can really spread the message and spread the values of the organization and help people understand what it is for them. Mm-hmm. And so having them be part of the entire process instead of, you know, the few senior leaders sitting around and coming up with them and then pushing them down, bring those influencers in from every aspect, from the manufacturing line, from the offices, from wherever, and just have those influencers come in and develop them with everyone.
I love that.
Then when you take that approach, now everyone has buy-in. Mm-hmm. Because this area knows how their people relate. This area knows how their people relate. And so now you're bringing in everybody's voices from all those areas instead of some people sitting around a table saying, well, that sounds like a really good core value. You're actually bringing everybody's voice to the table.
That's awesome. And again, I'm going to go back to the family perspective or the team perspective. You know, if you're going to do it for the smaller group versus an entire organization, think about that, you know, how valuable that is even for young children or teenage children, or, you know, to be able to have their voice in that, or like you said, people on the line, or, you know, every level of the organization as a representation in how those values are laid out.
Yeah, I would even, and I like that you brought that up, I would even go as far as saying that it's most critical in a family dynamic to have the kids' voices heard in those family core values. Mm-hmm. Because if parents sit around and say, this is how we parent, this is how it goes in the family, their voice is missed, and they're half the family, or in some cases more than half the family, depending on how many children you have. Right. So it's critical that their voices are part of the values you operate by.
Beautiful. So what I'm hearing is there's principles to doing this well, and those principles are, you know, should be applied no matter where you're using this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for the article. I think it was, you know, it was so valuable for me to read. I loved it. It's very relevant for what we're doing here at Thrive. So that was really cool. Is there any last thing that you would love to leave everybody with?
No, I think I hit those in my key strategies. Mm-hmm. And then one of the things I comment on is it's a balancing act and they should be nurtured. So whether you're doing it in business or in a family, revisit them, you know, because you set these values up a year ago or 10 years ago, it doesn't mean they're still relevant or they're still, you know, have a practical application in your business or your family now. Yeah. And so from a family standpoint, when I had little kids, our values were a lot different than when I have teenagers. And so just always revisiting those values and making sure they're still relevant and making sure they're still moving you forward.
I love that. Thanks so much for sharing that. So if you haven't read the article, or you want to get these articles before we show up on Facebook and talk about them, you can sign up for our newsletter through our website. On the first page of our website, there is a place where you can sign up and get these in your inbox every Thursday. We also have a lot of stuff going on at Thrive right now. We have some significant amount of events coming up. Check that out on our events page on our website. It's labeled upcoming events. We have some workshops that are going to be out there soon. We have a couple different work classes that are going to be out there soon. So check us out there. We love hanging out with you guys every Thursday. So comment below. That would be awesome. We would love to respond to those comments. Thanks again, Lori.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.